All right, let's get into it. But today we're doing something a little different. Instead of just breaking down a topic, we're going to step right into a story. A really big one. It's this incredible journey from the absolute emptiness of deep space all the way down to the surface of a world that's been sleeping for who knows how long. And it all starts with a message. So let's begin.
So picture this. You've got this vessel, the Stupa Ark, just hanging there in the void. It arrives at this incredible exoplanet, and what's wild is that the entire surface is carved with these gigantic patterns, mandalas the size of continents. But here's the thing. They're not there to land and plant a flag, not in the way we'd think of exploration. No, they're here for something else entirely. They're here to listen.
Okay, so the crew, who are actually a monastic order called the Sangha, they get there and right away, they know something is off. They were expecting a message, sure, but a message that would be ancient, right? Something that had taken thousands, maybe millions of years to cross the galaxy. But that's not what's happening. The message is coming through in real time. It's instantaneous. And according to everything we know about physics, well, that should be completely impossible.
So right off the bat, you have this massive puzzle. I mean, think about it. If you sent a radio signal or any kind of light-based message from another galaxy, it's going to be old news by the time it gets here. But this was happening now. It was a live conversation. So the huge question is, how in the world were the senders, this mysterious group they call the Ancestors, pulling this off?
And the answer is just mind-bending. Turns out the Ancestors weren't sending their message through space at all. They were using space-time itself, the actual fabric of the universe. It's kind of like, imagine the whole universe as a giant spiderweb. The Ancestors figured out how to just pluck one of the strings. And that vibration isn't traveling across the web, it's felt by the entire web at the exact same moment. It's based on this wild idea of macroscopic quantum entanglement. So the message never had to travel, it just was.
Now, here's where it gets even stranger. A signal like that, you can't just build a radio dish to pick it up. No way. The receiver itself had to be something totally different. It had to be biological. So these telepathic monks on the ship, the Sangha, they realized that they have to be the antenna. They had to literally sync their own consciousness with the quantum state of the planet below them just to be able to hear what was being said.
And this formula you're looking at, it's not really about math in the way we think of it. It was more like a philosophical key. See, this wasn't just a technical problem, it was a spiritual one. To get a perfectly clear signal, the monks had to be in perfect unity, with each other and with the planet. It's like tuning an old radio, right? Any static, and in this case, static means any individual ego, any stray thought. It would just garble the message. So they had to basically dissolve their sense of self and merge into one single, perfect consciousness. Only then could the message come through clean.
And once they did that, once they achieved that perfect, egoless unity, bam, the message came flooding in. Crystal clear. So, what was it? What did this impossible message actually say?
Well, the whole thing was structured in 3 distinct parts. They started calling it the Trinity Code, and it was big. It laid out a problem on a cosmic scale, and of course a solution that was just as epic.
Okay, so let's break it down. Part 1 was the source. A huge warning. Some kind of cosmic decay, this thing called the churn, was expanding and was going to wipe them out. Part 2 was the manifestation, the solution, and it's wild. The Ancestors didn't run, they didn't flee, they hit reset. They literally folded their entire world into a kind of higher dimensional sleep to just wait out the disaster. And part 3, resonance, the key. Remember those giant patterns on the planet's surface, the mandalas? Turns out they weren't just art or ruins. They were the lock to this whole sleeping world.
So they've got the message. They know what they need to do. The next logical step, right? Get down to the surface and use that key. But hang on. Getting from orbit to the ground is a nightmare. It's all fire and violence and friction. You'd think that would be a huge problem. But, of course, the Ancestors had already figured that out. And their solution was, well, it was beautiful.
And this right here shows you just how different their whole way of thinking was. I mean, our technology, it's all about brute force, right? We fight our way through the atmosphere with rockets and heat shields that burn up. But the Ancestors, their approach was all about harmony. They used something called a lotus shield. The idea wasn't to punch a hole through the atmosphere, but to kind of convince the atmosphere to just gently move aside for them.
So how did they do it? Well, this equation hints at the secret, a principle called perfect diamagnetism. Basically, they could create a magnetic field that was so precise it literally pushed the gases of the atmosphere away. So instead of that violent, fiery crash through the air that we're used to, their ship just caused the air to flow around it perfectly, like water flowing around a smooth stone. The result? No fire, no shaking, no friction. A completely silent and cold descent.
Yeah, this wasn't some controlled fall. It really was, as the text says, like a leaf settling on a still pond, just this moment of perfect, quiet grace. And they touched down, right in the heart of the biggest mandala on the planet.
Okay, so let's recap. They got the message, they cracked the code, and they've landed without a scratch. Now for the final piece of the puzzle. It's right there, under their feet. How on earth do you log into a computer that's the size of a planet?
Well, you don't use a keyboard or a mouse, that's for sure. There's no voice command. The interface was reality itself. So the landing party, these advanced beings called bodhisattvas, they position themselves at key points, and they use their own bodies as the input device. They form these very precise hand gestures called mudras, and they started these deep, resonant chants or mantras. They were literally translating their spiritual focus, their intent, directly into the mathematical language the planetary grid could understand.
And when their chanting, their resonance, finally hit the exact frequency they learned from the Trinity Code, the planet woke up.
The ground literally started to move, and from the very center of the mandala, this colossal geometric spire just rose up. It was humming with energy. This wasn't just a building, it was the access terminal, the physical on switch for an entire civilization waking up from a very, very long sleep.
But when they looked at the spire, its surface wasn't smooth. It was covered in a single, impossibly complex equation that was constantly shifting and flowing. And that's the final mystery this whole journey leaves us with. It's a heck of a question to think about, isn't it? If this is the key to waking a world, then what kind of physics, what kind of math is powerful enough to hold an entire civilization in perfect stasis in the first place?